So I'm super happy to welcome you because we have a super awesome story to say how we did our migration, the core banking migration without a zero downtime. So first, what's Solaris Bank? It's a tech company with a banking license. It's not a normal bank that you go to the office and you have people that serves you. We are a bank in a backend. So we are serving through our technologies, through APIs to our partners that they are the front for the customers. So we are behind all the big customers like Samsung or Vivid that you can not see us, but we are behind it. So let's see our agenda. So welcome and opening, and then our colleagues will show you and tell you why we did this awesome migration with zero downtime. And first of all, why we did such a thing that it's super not common in the banking and financial area. And in the end, we will have our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat, or in the end, you will also have time to ask them directly to our speakers. And who are our speakers? So I'm the moderator. I'm a senior software engineer. I'm working for Solaris Bank already almost 4 years. I was a Ruby developer. Now I'm switching to Java. And I was also participating with this zero downtime migration. And our speakers, they can introduce themselves.
Maybe I can start. Tristan Holl, I joined Solaris Bank more than 6 years ago when it was a project in Finland back then. And I basically have first-hand experience of how the thing started and how it evolved into the bank that ultimately had to migrate out of the old system landscape into the new one.
Let me continue. I'm Peter in Solaris Bank since December last year, and I was kind of the project lead for the migration project. And in my normal life, I'm one of the VPs for our core banking solution.
Hello, I'm Yegor. I'm another VP of core banking in Solaris Bank. I joined Solaris Bank early 2017, originally to work on a digital banking product because, well, back then we only had an idea that we want to build our own core banking system, but later moved a bit downstream to actually make sure that our digital banking product is being served by a good core banking system that can scale as efficient as possible for core banking solution.
All right. Hello, everyone. Dimitri, I'm not another core banking VP. Yep. Basically, I joined Solaris Bank 3 years ago, a bit more than 3 years ago, as a product owner in digital banking. Digital banking is, let's say, this exterior layer of our core banking system. And in my duties, it is to ensure that our partners and customers receive a smooth experience using our products. And just to mention, this picture was not taken during the migration, so that's not an answer how to migrate with zero downtime. Yeah, if you had such a, let's say, analogy in mind.
Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation. So let's go to the main why. So I give a voice to Tristan and I stop sharing.
Let me see if this works. You can see the screen. Great. So yes, I will talk a bit about where we were coming from as Solaris Bank. As I said, I joined Solaris Bank in 2015 when it was a very young company. Actually, it was not even a company, it was just a project team of 7 people. And within FinLeap, we thought about, okay, how would you build say the next version of a bank in the market? Not a classical bank that has branches, or just a direct bank like the big ones, which is providing direct customer service. But how can we build something that really supports also the whole fintech industry? And obviously, with 7 people, that was a huge challenge, and there were a lot of challenges ahead. From getting the banking license, hiring the people in the supporting functions, and obviously also deciding what we build first, because we needed to decide on what makes the, okay, fair enough. What's making us different on the market? Because obviously with 7 people, you cannot compete on the full banking landscape against the big players like a Deutsche Bank, a Commerzbank, or the international banks. So we looked into the market and saw that there was actually a significant lack of banking services that are accessible by machines. Because yes, especially in Germany, there were some, let's say, old school protocols to access your bank account, and there were some competitors which, for the most part, just exposed their classical banking system, SOAP APIs to the world, and the partners were pretty much bound into this old world, and they had to basically work with this. And we thought, well, what if a bank would more look like a Google API or an Amazon API? So just making it less friction to offer banking products as a fintech. And this is also how we started with, in the very beginning, 2 developers, then 4, 6. I think we ended up with roughly 10 to 12 when we actually got the banking license. And we focused on just a few products. And one of the products was digital banking, so bank accounts, not even cards back then, a lending product, some deposit products, and obviously the area around identity, because we have to know who our customers are. And those were the verticals that we were focusing on. And of course, there's a lot more to banking, and that's why we decided building it ourselves with a team of 7 doesn't bring enough value in the beginning. So we set it with a classical core banking provider in the market, actually a well-established banking provider that is serving quite some banks. And we built on top, like we built an abstraction layer on top, and we hopefully invested our resources in a smart way to actually make the biggest difference on the market in the beginning. And this served us pretty well in the beginning because we were also slowly growing in the beginning. And at some point we realized 5 to 10 years from now, this would not be sufficient anymore for us to serve with the quality level we would like to serve the market with. And that's when we decided to go a slightly different approach, and also a different approach to the majority of competitors. We said there is a core piece of a bank we want to own ourselves, especially as a platform bank that is serving many different business cases of our partners, the fintechs. And this was the payment ledger system and the payments integration, because we saw that by owning this, we have better control or full vertical control over the value chain, and we can build processes catering to our needs and not just being a ticket in a vendor backlog where we might or might not get a priority. And this would allow us to also build features based on our own internal priorities and also demand of our partners, and not so much, and we would not be so much reliant on the vendor prioritization, which obviously if you choose a big vendor, that has benefits because it's supporting everything. But that's the bright side. The dark side is actually you are in one prioritization bucket with the big players like a Commerzbank, a Deutsche Bank, whoever is the customer of those vendors. And that's when we settled, and Vivid was our first customer on the new system. We settled to build a secondary system aside of the old infrastructure. So we kind of built a second Solaris Bank in the beginning, and we started onboarding new partners on this new system. And with that, we gained confidence to serve the market with this new system, because it was, again, starting from 0 customers. It slowly ramped up. We figured out some things to improve along the way. And this was in 2020. And 2021 was now we had this new system, and this new system was already serving a significant amount of our customers in 2021. But obviously there's one question left. Okay, what do we do with the existing customers on the old system? Do we just say goodbye, or is there a smart way for us to bring them into a new infrastructure with as little friction as possible? And I think a lot of people heard about the successful migration projects in the market. We did not want to be one of those. So we don't want to be in line with an Apo bank that screwed up the migration and had struggles for weeks or months to bring the new system up and running, and the customers were severely suffering. So we took a different approach, and over the time when the new system was already in place, there was basically not the product system but the core banking system. We were in the lucky situation that our product systems were able to bridge a bit the old and the new world. So the connection to the outside world was already happening via an intermediary layer, which was connected to both systems. And this made it for us quite a lot easier to keep the API stable while exchanging the underlying infrastructure. It was still a challenge. And we obviously, there are a lot of things, like we have to cut the connections to the old system. We have to disconnect the old system from the outside world, namely SEPA and SWIFT. And obviously, we have to take all the data from the old system that is relevant, to examples, the accounts and the bookings on the accounts, into the new system. And ideally, this works without any downtime. And this is where we started last year to discuss the process around this, how this could be possible to make it without downtime and almost not noticed by any of our end customers or partners on the Big Bang Day, which actually was not really a Big Bang Day for us. And Peter is going to tell you more about the process.
Thank you, Tristan. Can you stop your presentation?
Sure.
So let's continue. So in my career, I had the luck or not of being part in 4 different banking migrations, and one of those 4 failed very badly, which is a very high quota, I guess. And if you follow the banking news, there has been one large migration last year of a very prominent bank, which didn't really go well, and that made us very cautious when we entered this project. And one of the things which happen a lot in these banking migrations, which somebody said that banking migrations are kind of the royal class of projects, because you have to think about so many things, getting together so many stakeholders, systems, and so on. That's difficult. And what we did is we started to separate different streams and decouple everything, or the most things we could. So in the end, we didn't make one migration on one particular day. We made a lot of migration. I think all in all, it's 5 from on a system level, but on a more detailed level, it's even more. So obviously, we started, as we had to break up the monolith of the old core banking system. We started with setting up a new general ledger system and started sending data there. And I will come to the timelines later, but I can already say that in March this year, we did our first end of quarter out of the new general ledger system. So that went very smooth. Also, we had to replace or find a new way to send out regulatory reporting. There are systems for that. We partnered up with a vendor, set the system up, and I think in April, we did our first reporting out of the new system. So that had already been done. Also, we are having loans and deposits, and we in that case, as Corona is mostly, or our new core banking solution is mostly for accounts and transactions. We also partnered up with a vendor and did a different approach on migrating the loans there, and that was by product. So we took one product, for example, our split rate product, did a migration script there and migrated only these loans to the new system whilst everything else was running. That's what you can do with loans. It's even though it sounds easy, it had been a challenge also time-wise, because we had a lot of different loan products which had to be parameterized and set up and obviously tested, but it also went well. So we could keep the timeline of being ready with everything in June. And last but not least, and that's what we wanted to emphasize in this session, is the accounts and transaction migration. And that you can also separate in the old business, which has been in the old core banking system, but we did a step in between by giving our partners the chance to already create new business in the new core banking system, so they can see how the system is behaving and also get the guarantee that nearly everything will stay the same. Why did we do it? I mean, I already mentioned that we wanted to avoid a massive big bang migration on one day over multiple systems, with new systems starting to work, because that never works well. Therefore, we chose that stepped approach. We could split up the workload on multiple teams and also see if something goes wrong here, we need to take some measures that some issues don't happen in the future. So time-wise, somewhere in 2020, the decision was made to migrate in 2021. And then we already canceled the contract with the old vendor to the 30th of June. Let's say to raise the pressure a little. Then we started with the conceptual phase. And as I already said, we in December 2020, we started with the general ledger project, which then I said it before, had been finished in March 21. And in January, even though there had been some conceptual work before, we officially started with the deposit loan and account projects, which then came to a happy ending in June 2021. Also, what we also had to do, which also put some load on everybody, was that our new system hadn't had all the feature the old system would provide. One example is the target 2 payments, or our overdraft feature. So we had to integrate that in time to be ready with everything in June. And also, I said it before, we let our partners create new business on the new solution starting in April. I think it was the week after Easter. For the accounts and transactions migration, we did some general assumptions to make things more exciting and make also some things easier for our partners and customers. That means we said that the IBANs, virtual IBANs, our cards, obviously the existing BIGs, and the partner-facing booking IDs and the APIs are staying exactly the same. We also said that all accounts and transactions would be migrated, which were in the old system, to also provide a history for everybody in case we need to look something up out of the older days. Also, Tristan said it before, keep the downtime as low as possible, which we also achieved. Keep the card services available for the whole weekend and the whole migration time for all customers. And also, as we had existing customers on the new solution Corona, keep Corona open with that business for the whole time, so nobody would be affected in that. if you migrate accounts and transactions in our European banking world, it's not only that, because there is more. There can be reservations, for example. Mostly of them would be from cards business, but there can also be other reservations on accounts. Also, we have offer virtual IBANs, and there's obviously SDD mandates and the before mentioned overdraft. And these were the things we needed to migrate in detail. And we also took different approaches there. Diego will tell you more in detail after me. But in short, for bookings and reservations, we did a gradual approach. So we migrated the transactions, posting and bookings over time until both systems were in sync. And we kept them in sync. For the accounts, we kind of did the same, but we did it up front. So a sync had already been done before. And that left us with a smaller big bang for the virtual IBANs, non-cards reservations, SCD mandates, and the overdraft. And now I hand over to Yegor.
Okay, give me a second, I will share my screen. Okay, let's see if the sharing would work. Click on current slide. Okay, perfect. So I assume you can see my screen. As Peter mentioned, the first thing that we have done, we actually made 5 or 6 migrations out of one huge migration. I will talk a bit in the details about like one of the streams or one of the migrations that we have performed, which is payment to engine, which for us was one of the most stressful, because that's part of our system or core banking infrastructure, which is the most real-time problem, right? Because what our customers feel as an effect of what would be downtime if they cannot make a card payment, or if they cannot access account, or they cannot receive funds. So nothing new about the principle. The first thing, as already mentioned, we had to divide and conquer. So we had to holistically look into a specific domain of core banking and try to split it into subparts to figure out what is a subdomain which we have to analyze. So in some sense, the exercise was try to make an existing picture of old core banking system, try to cut it into puzzle pieces, and try to replace them with a new puzzle pieces and figure out how they can be attached to each other. For payment engine, we figured out close to, I think it was roughly 10 domains, a bit more than I have on the presentation, because here are like kind of the main ones. And then each domain, the first thing we have done, we had to look into 2 perspectives. We had to look on data and we had to look into processes. And the trick is, if you migrate the data from one system to another, you have to make sure that you transformed or you cleansed and prepared data input from old to new one can still completely work with all the processes that you have. So after we have done an initial split subdomain by subdomain, we had to run a lot of analytics and workshops to figure out how do we transform data, in which way can we migrate this data, and that's the most important part with our focus on no downtime. We had to analyze all the processes which are touching this a subdomain, if they can correctly work with the new data that we bring from other system. And if we flash back to a big plan that Peter has described, we also needed to outline what are the switch conditions and dependencies, because we would need to enable new system step by step, making sure that, for example, as soon as we make accounts active, that there is no dependencies that was spoken before. Like it's a very simple example. you cannot migrate virtual IBANs before you migrated account, because the virtual IBAN is dependent on account. That's one of the most easiest and obvious dependencies. And as a final touch, something without which you cannot start auto migration, because quality auto migration is the most important thing. You need to have a verification and reconciliation time. So after you flagged yourself that, okay, you've performed the migration, you need to make sure that quality of this is fine. You need to have a check procedures. You need to have a left and right sides that you can compare. And the main for the main conditions and process might be very different. So when we talk about no downtime, it's drills down that per every subdomain, you want to figure out, is it important to make this immigration in continuous mode, so that customers don't feel disruption of a service, or maybe specifically for this subdomain, you can go with something easier, like just a one-time data transfer. I think overall, if we look back into how we migrate different domains and data, we can see three main patterns that we use. For more static data, right? So for example, if you talk about your ledger, right, and a typical rule for the ledger, it's done by pen, not by pencil. As soon as you write data, it doesn't change. So effectively, as soon as old system gets data input, you can just copy paste it or synchronize it to new system. In some cases, you know that information that being transformed needs to be able to be used like as a split second for switch. Right? That's, for example, a mode which we used actively for card payments, because like card process is a bit complex, that you have authorization, have transactions related to them. So in such cases, the system which communicates with our core banking had to learn to do it in two systems in parallel. For example, if there is a card hold, to put it in system A and system B, and know in the process how to refer to this hold on system A and system B, and being able to switch at any random point of time. For some domains which are less, let's say, felt by customers, like a very simplistic example is SDD mandates. You need your SDD mandate data to be actual on the point of settlement, which is usually once per day, or when you have a request from customer to look at the mandate. Other time, this data just stays there, right? So that's a perfect example of a migration which you can simplify to kind of small big bang, when you just take data from one system, transform cleanse, upload, and you forget about it. So for every domain, we had to analyze, okay, do we need to do it in no frequency style, so more like a continuous migration to just switch without customer impact, or for this particular part of data, we don't need it, so we can do it in a simpler way. The trick is for continuous mode that banking data is all about having like a source of truth. The worst thing that you can experience if something is using different sources of truth, right? So in our case, when we have an old system, we have a continuous parallel streaming of data into new system. We need to make sure that if customer hosted on a target system tries to make a payment to account on old system, which is already inside the new system, but it's not managed by it, I would perform the payment as if this account was not known to new system. So in some sense, to make sure that you continuously migrate the data, but you make sure that you put a strict isolation onto each process. So there is no wrong booking or wrong judgment on accounts based on the new system before the switch is done. And I think that was like one of the main toolings that we used in order to removes this kind of a downtime for 5 hours to migrate the critical data and to migrate it in parallel, but at the same time to make sure that it doesn't affect the existing customers without a need. And Peter mentioned about it earlier. Because of those series of switches, the most intricate part was again to prepare a schedule, like when do we switch which process, to make sure that you switch process A, a customer can still deal with this, process goes fine. After this, you switch process B. So all the switches are making no customer to impact, and at the same time, it overall gives a fluent feeling of nothing happening, right? Because like as much as invisible migration could be, the better experience we have for our customers. But that's what was happening on the side of Solaris Bank, but there is another side, because when we talk about its customers, they always have something in front of them, which are our partners. And while we were trying to make it invisible for the outside, Dmitry will continue to tell how we try to coordinate it with partners, so customer experience definitely doesn't get affected.
All right, thanks, Igor. Let me start sharing. Talk. And then, okay, not this one. Okay, I cannot show you in the presenter mode. Then I just show you in this mode. All right, exactly. So that sounds like a solid plan, right? What do you guys think? For us, yes, it was kind of okay. That's probably in the right direction. You know, sounds reasonable. What do you think, our dear partners? And the partners were like, yeah, you know, but you know, what it actually means for us, right? And then we basically went into the let's say a project separate, pretty much migration project, where we manage our partners' migrations and integrations. And since Solaris Bank is this, let's say, as Tristan said, a platform, in the background we have over 30, 40 partners that were affected by this migration. And every partner has basically its own use case, features, and product requirements. So for us, it meant that, okay, you know, if we want to ensure the zero downtime and continuous services, we need to make sure first that the new system offers all the products and features that this partner is using, right? Then we basically enter with this partner into a testing mode, and partner tests, opens a couple of accounts on new system and checks that all the systems are working. And then in the meantime, we also make sure that our internal readiness with functional teams is also on check. And then this partner is basically, let's say, whitelisted or ready for the migration. And then you do it, you know, 30, 40 times for each partner separately. That's what we believed would be a reasonable approach. But you know, migration is a bit like a Christmas time. You get presents quite often. So when we actually went to the partners and tried to basically walk them through this process, we had different reactions. And here we have three, let's say, typical partner journeys. They all end up in Corona at the very end, but the journey themselves were pretty different. We had partners who were really engaged in the beginning, and that really sounds cool. We want to have instant payments, bookings, and all the speed and scalability that your new system offers. Then as soon as we went into the first, let's say, tests and checks and detailed conversation, we were like, do we really need to do it? The old system is actually not that bad, you know, do we really have to do it? You know, yeah. So there was some basically journey and communication that we need to do to ensure that, you know, with these partners, we still bring them together with us to Corona. Other partner type was where, you know, from the very start, already a partner we had to migrate. Migration. Who said migration? I mean, that's something sounds scary. Right? What about the you know, the process? What are these details? How this will work? You know, what are the guarantees? How we can be sure that everything gonna work? You know, can you commit that it will not work as the old, worse than the old system? So there was a lot of basically questions and let's say nerves right in the beginning that eventually we also had to manage and reduce and convince the partner for the migration. And also there were partners who said, okay, understood, just tell me when I need to do it. And then we tell them and then they do it, right? Unfortunately, this type of partners was not the majority. So, you know, by now, basically what, you know, to sum up what we just discussed so far, what does it actually mean to migrate core banking system, right? If we sum all these checkpoints and things you need to take care of, you need to come up with a plan and revise the plan as many times as necessary. Essentially, the plan is a moving target during the migration. We need to align this plan with the internal stakeholders. In our case, it was half of the bank. You need to communicate your approach to the partners and answer their questions, and both great questions and other kind of questions. You need to firefight technical issues along the way that will occur. And if they're not occurring, then probably you're missing something. You need to tame the unfolding complexity of the migration. In our case, the migration that we saw in the beginning eventually pretty much doubled when we went closer towards the end. With this complexity and the technical issues firing here and there, you need to keep your stakeholders and management cool, because it wouldn't help to have your management sitting next to you, looking over your shoulder and freaking out on every, let's say, technical issue that you're having. You need to ensure that you have dress rehearsals. This is super important. Our dress rehearsal was basically happened 1 week before the actual migration. After this rehearsal, we had 30 open tickets on digital banking side, as an example. 30 tickets, 30 issues to fix in 7 days until we do it on production, exactly the same. And that was the time when you need to prioritize. You need to prioritize again and over again. And also realize that not every problem needs to be resolved. Checks are your best friends. Yeah, Igor and Peter mentioned that there is no great mind that can foresee it all. And basically, when you migrate around 100 million banking records that deal with people's money and data, there is no other way than rely on these automated checks. In our case, we migrate 100 million banking entries, and by the day of the production migration, we had not a single delta in account balance or available balance of a single customer. And then, you name it, right? So, okay, you might say, okay, I got it. So if I follow this plan, I can perform a surgery operation on a live patient such that the impact is barely noticeable. Is it the takeaway? We believe that our main takeaway from the migration is as follows. Along the way of the migration and all these, let's say, plans that we had, what was it that kept the things together when it seemed that nobody really understood how this at some point should come together and along, right, and converge into the smooth process. What is this great mind that planned the migration and anticipated all the challenges that we faced? What is this great leader that kept people together, right, during these hard times and the times were definitely, let's say, interesting? Is it a chief migration officer, right? Is it the key that you just hired somebody who did this, you know, over and over again and does it as a full-time job? Is it maybe a chief planning officer who plans everything? Or maybe a chief crystal ball officer who tells you the future? In our case, it was you, or it was us. It was every one of us. It's the colleague next to you. And it's also the person that you might have barely talked to before. It's us together who can make this happen. And that's the only learning, or the only way we realized and experienced such huge projects can be pulled off. Only together, working in a collaborative mode, into transparent mode, talking to each other and being flexible and agile, right? And to finish this off, this is a sneak peek into how we did the migration. This is the end of the last day, I believe. So you see already a couple of beers. The brand of the beer, I guess, is not a surprise. But yeah, that was a fun time, a really excited learnings and experience, but also first and foremost, fun. So thanks guys a lot for listening to this and to our story, and we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much for the great story. And yes, we do have questions. And let's go to the Q&A. Okay, so first question was, did you use this migration to also migrate away from some technology you consider obsolete or over-engineered or just wrong for your use case? So Igor, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I can try to answer. It's a bit hard to answer directly on this question because I would maybe start from something else. I would say that we migrated from core banking that we purchased from external vendor to core banking that we completely designed ourselves, right? So on one hand, easy answer is yes, because when we build core banking for our own needs, completely in-house, process by process, we looked how everything works. We had huge workshops. I don't know if you're familiar with a methodology of event storming. So we try to apply that actually quite successfully. So on one hand, we can say that yes, we switched to something less over-engineered because we switched from a generic solution by third-party vendors that is designed to be sold to multiple targets to a solution that we designed with completely for us, with our knowledge of processes, how we want them be, the level of digitalization, let's use this as a buzzword in each process. And by this, we jumped out of many things that were obsolete or over-engineered or wrong. And I think in both technical way, right? Because when we build a new software, we build it on architecture that we assume is as modern, scalable, and fitting domain as possible, as well as processually, right? Because we jump to processes which work exactly like we want without like any adjustments we have to do just because in software built 20 years ago, it works like this because it was made for German national clearing and not for SEPA, for example. Okay. So yes, like in generally, like maybe to sum up, yes, we use this migration to get rid of some wrong and old things, but mainly because that's how we design our new core banking to be exact fit for our needs. Hope it answers.
Thank you, Igor. Is it answering your question, Claudio? I hope so. So the next question is from Aaron. It's a little bit longer one. So I will read it. As far as I know, the old system was a monolith, which you replaced by microservice-based system now. Can you also tell in a few sentences how you handle transactionally so how do you avoid these turbulent transactions? And eventual-based architecture, which eventual consistency sound problematic for a banking system. I guess transactionally or asynchronous replication instead was also a big issue during the migration itself, whenever you needed to keep data in sync between old and new system. It's a tricky question. And who would like to answer?
I think I can answer in parts, and then maybe someone can pick it up, right? Because like unfortunately today we are less of engineering crowd, right? So like when we talk about transactionality, which is even a word hard for me to pronounce, and distributed transactions, it's I think a bit more engineering questions than a crowd here to answer. But there is like a good point in this question, which is one of my favorite topics, and like a lot of people in Solaris Bank know this. It's banking and eventual consistency, and there I have to say it's a trick, right? Like we, as was part of the question, we designed our new payment engine part of core banking system in a way of event sourcing, eventual consistency. In not every application works perfect. So in some cases, we had to do workarounds to make specific interfaces or specific things a bit more consistent than originally we expected to. So that's at least what we can share for sure. Asynchronous replication, big issue during the migration itself. It's not that much of an issue, to be honest, right? Because again, domain by domain, there was not really a problem to synchronize things in a synchronous way, right? Because like let's say the two biggest things that are, let's say, the biggest migrations or the biggest data points is accounts and ledger. In case of ledger, you're not worried about doing it asynchronously, right? Because your ledger is immutable. As soon as something happened, you move it and it stays like this, forever. So in this case, like asynchronous nature actually didn't make much impact. For accounts, same story. Accounts was a bit specific domain because actually the first prototype of event sourcing that we used in Solaris Bank was applied in accounts domain. So we already had like a proxy upon external old solution, which was keeping track of everything happening with our accounts in an event sourcing way. So in this way, we just like duplicated events and it worked quite smoothly. I hope I can answer some of this because I think I'm not sure 100% can understand what's the most interesting to hear in this topic, and the topic is, I think, a bit.
Maybe I can add to this. So what helped us a bit was that transactions for the major part have a two-factor requirement. So you have kind of a two-step process, and we had a two-step commit kind of, because we first placed the reservation on a higher level where the payment acceptance happened, and then the posting or booking happened afterwards, and the reservation was kept in place until the posting or booking ended up in our systems again. That was the old system world, and that helped us also in the migration because we were able to keep accepting transactions on the API level and internally reserve those funds on the accounts without actually posting them onto the coming system at that time. So it's kind of a buffer layer that helped us here in the migration.
Yeah, now like if you didn't hear some specific to answer, please ask more precisely, because like you had a very big question. I'm not sure we grasped all of it, right? So, but we're happy to answer as much as we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Igor and Tristan. So we have one more questions. I will read it. Nowadays, there is a talk of coreless banking. Was such an option relevant to your implementation?
Coreless?
I think we need to ask what coreless is, because like at least I'm not familiar with this notion.
I've roughly read about it. So the problem is that wherever you ask about what core banking is, we'll probably get a different answer. And classical core banking providers would call the core banking system the system that takes care of payments, general ledger, maybe ML processes, worst case also reporting, and you have everything in one software solution. I think we already took, if I understand this coreless correctly, but I've just read one page about this. We already built it in a way that is kind of distributed. So what we have built is a payment ledger system, which is primarily a ledger system with an integration into SEPA and Target2 and Swift. And all the supporting functions like reporting, ML processes are for the major part outside of this system. So we try to avoid building something that is very tightly coupled like classical core banking systems, because we also, our business model, we assemble different pieces of banking to produce a product on the API side. And that's why the system, even though we call it core banking system, is our interpretation of core banking, which is primarily a customer payment ledger system. Not sure if this answers the question.
It's maybe to compare, because like I'm a bit more familiar with landscapes and telecoms, like that's where I work in more corporate infrastructure. Usually you have one or two big systems, like in telecoms, for example, you have like prepaid billing and postpaid billing, and then you try to orchestrate it somehow, but you have two monsters around which you build, right? And as Tristan said, that's not architecture that we have after migration. So, like, I don't think we have a core per se in general.
We have many cores.
Like many cores, it sounds hard to say. There was a period in this company when we had so many things called core banking that we had to be like distinguish between soft core banking and hardcore banking. But luckily, we came to a bit better notions over time.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there are no more questions in the Q&A section. Are there any new questions that you would like to ask? I think that's all. So thank you very much for the participation. I hope you will stay with us for the next session that we will host soon. And yeah, see you next time.